going to be like, I can't hear me anyway.
Let's get down to brass tacks right now. This chair is very low, first of all. That's the first thing that I want to, because I've never sat in this chair. I've sat in these chairs, but compared to that couch, don't you feel like that couch, Chant, like you're in 5 years old?
Yeah.
And like it's your feet don't quite touch the ground?
It's a little big.
That's good.
And same with Jesse. Jesse, before we talk about what actually happened with rates yesterday, tell everybody about the time that you thought you were 6 feet tall.
We could go on for weeks with stories about how I've discovered myself over the last 9 years. So I never thought I was 6 feet tall, but I always thought I was like 5'10" and a half. And so I don't know if I've shrunk or I just always thought that, because what did we figure out? I was like 5'9".
If you're lucky, 5'9". It was like 5'8" and a half.
Oh, that's funny.
And
so Jeremy, that's as good as the time
So
that I didn't
funny.
know I was bald.
I
I was telling that story yesterday to Taylor Frampton.
Oh, you were?
Yeah, because I'm telling you, I've never had a more fun 10-hour drive. We laughed,
that?
we cried, we went everywhere you could go.
Listen, and a more fun 10-hour drive in which everyone was sober.
Yeah, we were all
there you go.
sober.
This is, man, anyway, look, there you go.
It was,
all right,
it was
guys,
phenomenal.
listen, thank you for bringing you to this show.
You bet, brother.
By the way, we've also got Chantry Abbott with us with Guild Mortgage, and Chant was on last week with us, and we need to get down to the bottom of this. So here's what's happening right now in real estate. Yesterday, the Fed had this big vote to cut rates. And what was interesting is what we saw was a lot of realtors. I actually saw a realtor go online and say, hey, basically what you've been hoping for has happened if you're wanting to buy a home. Nothing actually even changed for housing yesterday. And we need to talk about why. And I told my team, today's one of the biggest days in real estate with this vote. But it's not because rates were going to drop. And I realized after, I don't think I was clear on that because mortgage rates were going to drop. I feel like this rate drop is the
Hope.
What's the word here? It is the indicate. I don't even know what the word is, right?
Catalyst?
It's the catalyst. It is the catalyst for everything that goes down this fall.
Yes.
Chant, talk to us. What actually happened?
Yeah, so the Federal Reserve came out and they lowered their Fed funds rate by 0.5% in rate. It's the first time they've done a reduction since the COVID days, and we've been going up. The interesting thing about mortgages, though, and we were talking about this weeks ago, is that mortgages predict what the Fed is going to do in the future. So when the Fed met a couple months ago, they said, most likely at the September meeting, we are going to cut the rate. Anywhere from 1/4 to 0.5% in rate. Well, the markets, based on what their knowledge and the inside scoop is that they believed the Fed would probably cut rate. It was about a 70% belief, and they really do measure that. Like a 70% belief that the Fed would cut rates 0.5% at this meeting that just ended yesterday. And that's exactly what they did.
Correct.
We'll see what happens today and tomorrow, but in general, it really didn't change mortgage rates from where they were 2 or 3 weeks ago. Now, 2 or 3 weeks ago, we did get a nice little bump down in rate. We were probably about 0.5% lower in rate than we were last month.
And what's interesting is yesterday, after the announcement, they actually ticked up a little bit.
Yeah.
Mortgage
when
rates.
I say a little bit, like very little.
Hardly enough to matter, but they didn't go down at all.
Right. So they had already anticipated and done what they were going to do.
Yeah, and we've had so many clients that they're like, I want to wait and see what the Fed does. I go, it probably could only make it worse, because had they came out and only lowered it 1/4 in rate, it would have been the Fed came in and lowered the rate 1/4. Well, that actually would have drove mortgage rates up, because mortgages had a 70%. They believe there was a 70% chance they'd go down 1/2. So that would have been some really interesting headlines.
Right.
Fed cuts rate, mortgage rates go up. That's what would have happened. So it pretty much exactly what. And I want rates to go down from an affordability standpoint, but I also hope they're really careful, because I just cannot. We can't afford to see interest rates at 3 or 4% right now. Home prices just wouldn't do it. Income wouldn't support it.
Well, even in the lower 5s would be
Starting to push the limit.
Yeah, it would be interesting. And not that we don't want it to be more affordable, but if we see that, I think the market will kickstart again, and it will basically wipe away everything we just did.
Yeah. And I think people on the outside are like, you guys are mortgage and real estate guys. You want the market to go absolutely crazy because you make so much money. It's like, I really want kind of a healthy, steady, stable. I don't like the rush, mad dash, people overpaying craziness. It really isn't great. It's hard to give good advice in that kind of a time.
Yeah.
2020 and 2021, some people that bought at the very beginning, it was awesome, but there's also some people that risked a lot. They risked a lot. They maybe didn't get the house they want, and they maybe overpaid for what it was worth because there was like this frenzy, and I don't want that.
What I like about right now is there's a lot of buyers that aren't afraid to put in offers that are maybe too low. There was a long time when that wasn't the case.
Yeah, I believe that. I've thought people are always funny because they think that the list price is set in stone. I'm like, the cool thing about real estate is everything's negotiable.
I have a buyer right now, and there are people that literally, they cannot sleep at night unless they actually try to get a deal. It's just who they are.
Yeah.
It's not offensive. It's not anything against the seller. It's called negotiation. And I can't tell you how many times I see people get so, including agents.
Oh yeah.
Get so offended. And I'm like, wait a minute. Isn't it interesting that we're not supposed to get offended by an overpriced listing?
Well,
we're supposed to just pay what the seller wants. But we get offended over a buyer saying, no, this is what I think it's worth. Instead of dancing together and saying, okay, let's see where we can get to.
Yeah. Well, there's this fear, and I do understand this for a lot of folks of being taken advantage of. And so to not have tried is effectively to have been taken advantage of. And so it's been, I actually really appreciate what you said, Chantry, as well, about, people want the real estate market to go crazy. And I'm thinking, man, hasn't it been so great since prices are so high? I'm like, no, if the median home price were $350 instead of $500, it'd be a much better real estate market.
Yeah, it would be much
for everybody involved.
Exactly.
And which would significantly decrease, real estate fees, right, for realtors, but it would still be better.
Yeah,
it would be much better. We'd all actually in this trio be talking about purchasing real estate in St. George for rental purposes.
Yeah, it would create
at $350, not $500.
It would create a so much healthier market.
Yeah.
For everybody involved.
So,
including sellers.
Well, and Chant, so to go back to this, we've got Chantry Abbott with Guild Mortgage on. By the way, at 8:35 when we go live on our radio, our normal radio programming with KDXU Radio, we're going to have a couple of really great guests on from the St. George Parade of Gardens. It's never happened before. It's a brand new thing.
Okay, that's why
they're doing this. It runs this weekend. So this runs 3 days, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And that's going to be really cool. So please stay with us. Facebook Live is going to keep running. We'll be on KDXU Radio at 8:35 a.m. So Chant, to come back and talk about this, there's a lot of confusion in the real estate market about what did and didn't happen. Talk to us in the most English possible about federal funds rate versus, what the federal funds rate is and why mortgage rates didn't go down. Because people are like, here's what threw people off. First time in 4 years, they're going to reduce these, because I was watching all this news. And of course, people are thinking, what do you mean first time in 4 years? They've been changing rates like crazy. Well, this is different. Can you give us like an English explanation?
Yeah. And so they did go down, so to speak, and it's just not exactly equal. They went down several weeks ago based on what they knew the Fed was going to do. But what the actual Fed fund rate is the money that banks and institutions can lend money to each other. And so it directly impacted home equity. So like if you hear the term prime,
home equity,
prime is typically at 3% on average above the Fed funds rate. So that's kind of like the net profit margin for the bank. So if the Fed funds rate's at 5 and 5.5, we just barely experience prime at 8.5. So anybody that goes to get a home equity line of credit or an auto loan or a business loan,
Right.
prime's kind of the starting point. So you may hear them say, you know, you're prime plus 1% because you got a lower credit score. So that means you got a rate of 9.5. Or maybe you're a very good risk and they're doing a special and they're giving you slightly better than prime. So they're not making their whole 3%.
Okay.
So everybody that has a balance on a home equity line of credit, their interest just went down. Right exactly at 0.5%.
Interesting.
So I have a home equity line of credit. We do some real estate stuff with.
Yes.
It was at exactly 8.5. I was just a dead even prime. And so today I'm being charged interest at 8% instead of 8.5.
Oh, nice.
So the Fed doesn't, by changing the Fed funds rate, they don't directly control mortgages, but it indirectly changes mortgages for sure. They can't exactly do it, but mortgages are going to follow that a little bit for sure. Especially because it's really economic drivers that impact the interest rates. If things are skyrocketing and the economy's too hot and the Fed's driving rates up, then mortgage rates are going to go up. If we hit into a recession, then odds are rates will go down a little bit.
This is correct.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So, look, here's the question. Okay. So, how do they go about... Let's just talk, because the Fed has this big meeting. They love to have meetings. They're like, we had the Jackson Hole meeting. We had the Nantucket meeting. So they recently had the Jackson Hole meeting.
Where's the
Nebraska?
Nebraska? Just Nebraska. You don't need to do anything fancy.
So
Nice.
how do they go about reducing mortgage rates? What does that look like? Because mortgage rates are bouncing, right? And what does that look like? Who's doing that? How's that happening?
So the Fed used to control mortgage rates more because they were actually buying mortgage-backed securities. And think of it like they're buying a stock. Well, if you're buying a stock and there's a high demand for it, then that reduced the interest rate on the loans. And so they called it, when they were trying to get away from it, they called it quantitative easing.
Quantitative easing, I remember.
But what happened was in like 2009 or 10, after we had market crashed, they were trying to kickstart the mortgage and real estate market. And they started buying mortgage-backed securities in order to drive some demand and create a value for them so that lenders would actually want to do loans.
Right.
And it kept interest rates from getting too out of hand because they wanted to keep interest rates fairly low, so it made sense to try to buy. They were trying to get the market going. They've since gone away from that. And I think Jesse and I talked about this a little last week.
Yeah, we did.
They even started selling some of those off. So not only are they not buying, now they were selling those off and flooding it into the market. They were doing it on purpose because what that did is it drove up mortgage rates, which they wanted to happen. They wanted to slow the flow.
Right.
Okay. So that's also why they bump up the Fed rate, because large businesses that borrow lots of money or consumers that are getting auto loans, RV loans, boat loans, home equity lines of credit, as rates go up, that slows all that down. And that's exactly what their purpose was to slow the economy down.
Right.
Yeah.
So now that's happened. So they look at a couple things. They look at inflation. How much has everything gone up? And they measure that really closely. And then they also measure a couple other main things of unemployment. So believe it or not, they want a certain level of unemployment. It's healthy. If there's zero unemployment, then it's just the market's too hot and prices are going up too fast on things and affordability is getting out of control.
And that's actually one of the things that's been really stubborn and why it's been almost 2.5 years for them to make this move, because unemployment was not moving.
Yeah, and there was even, people were still kind of growing through some of this time of them increasing rates too. Like when I say people, I mean like these large corporations that impact employment.
Right.
They were in some cases still adding new jobs. And so they really had to wait this out until that quit being the case.
Right.
Until people started saying, okay, because borrowing money in most ways is how a business needs to borrow money in order to expand operations.
Yeah, this makes it cheaper for businesses to expand operations.
And so they wanted businesses to quit expanding operations to a degree. And so raising the rate on it, it stops making financial sense to do that, to borrow and expand and grow.
Right.
So what about mortgage rates? I mean, let's just talk predictively, guys. They're claiming, right? There's been a claim of further mortgage cuts now. There's been a claim of further mortgage cuts, maybe post mortgage rate cuts, post U.S. presidential debacle. I mean, sorry, I misspoke. Election. It's a debacle election. I confuse the two. So, what do you think, Chant? What are you hearing? What are they saying?
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
If the economy stays on the trajectory that it's on, meaning it's slowing down and unemployment is slightly increasing, then most likely mortgage rates will actually go with that. They'll go down.
Okay.
They'll kind of continue to go down as the economy struggles.
Talk to us about, let's talk real in our time. It's 8:24. Got about 5 minutes. Let's talk real rates today. I text Chant a lot about rates. The reason I text him is you can go today, as we do, Chantry, all of us, and just say prevailing mortgage rate today. That's very right.
Yeah.
But I always want to hear from you, and so I'll text you, or
What is that actually
Or occasionally
shaping
I'll
out to
text
be?
Tyler Celeste, so I don't bug you as much.
I love it.
Right? I mean, these guys are some of our great lenders that we love working with. Chantry's here with Guild Mortgage. Right now, typical rates. Let's talk conventional FHA. What if somebody wanted like 15 years? Just a couple, quote some rates.
6 to 6.25 is pretty normal. That means you're a good borrower, decent little down payment, pretty good credit. You're probably in the 6 to 6.25 range today.
Okay.
What's starting to really drive things, though, we've literally noticed it just in the last week and a half, 2 weeks, is that without getting too technical, you can pay a reasonable cost, which is buy downs and points, but a reasonable cost to get a rate closer to maybe 5.5.
Woo-hoo, baby.
The reason I think that's super important is because in my opinion, anything around or below 6, the affordability starts to make sense here locally.
Yeah.
It's still expensive to own a home, and it will always be expensive to own a home in St. George.
Yes.
We're a resort destination, and it's never going to be the cheapest place to have home ownership.
Nope.
That changed a long time ago, and it's never going back.
Yeah, and I think that there was, there was a lot of resistance to that, and you know when you all of a sudden start noticing that days got shorter. This is just, I'm speaking metaphorically. You're like, geez, like you didn't the first few days notice, and then last night we were out with the high school mountain biking team. And we're going, it's 7:30. It's like getting kind of dark. You know when you realize it happened, but you weren't paying attention? That's what was happening with this resort thing. It had happened, but we weren't, a lot of us, we meaning collectively, didn't notice it until, honestly, I think it's like 5-10 years ago.
Yeah.
Yep.
People are like, oh, crap, we're in a resort town. Well, we were resort town 25 years ago.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Suddenly the days got shorter on us.
Yeah, totally. I like that.
So, all right, this is interesting. So let's talk first-time buyer, because first-time buyers the FHA rates tend to be better than, at least I'm seeing some low FHA rates, correct?
Yeah, they're very good. Like we're super lucky here in Utah. We have a program called Utah Housing, and that really is they pair that with an FHA loan, and they allow you to buy a house with no money down. So I'm licensed in like 10 or 12 states, and as far as I know, the Utah Housing Zero Down is by far, we call it a down payment assistance program, by far the best down payment assistance program that I know of.
Really?
And it's because their qualifying is really pretty loose. It's easier to qualify for this than most of them. They're not super restrictive on credit or debt to income.
Right.
But their rates are unbelievable. Their rate's below 6 today, I'll bet. I didn't look this morning
nice.
to see, but that's a zero down first.
And that's zero down. And look, if you wanted to go for like a 15-year mortgage, which they're always going to get a lower rate. I mean, I'm seeing some.
Yeah.
Did I see like 5.7? Maybe?
Yeah, in general, the rule of thumb has kind of always been a 15-year rate's about 0.5% lower than the 30-year rate.
Yeah. Okay. Versus 6.2. So, guys, Chantry Abbott, thanks for coming in here. We're going to take a what we call a brief break. And at 8:35, we're going to have some great folks on. We're going to talk about something that most of you have. Most people had no idea this even existed, guys.
I'm pretty excited.
And this is so cool. This is the St. George Parade of Gardens. Isn't that cool?
Yes.
And we'll have Karen Goodfellow and Doug Bennett. I'm just getting a little excited this morning. Doug Bennett come on here with us, and I think it's really kind of a fun conversation about something that has not been done in St. George, and this thing launches tomorrow. So, guys, we're live, by the way, at Larkin Group headquarters, downtown St. George, and we'll be live on KDXU Radio at 8:35 on the button, right?
Yep.
Guys, if you just picked this up, Chantry Abbott, thanks for coming in here. And guys, we've got all of his contact information, but what's the best way for someone to reach you, Chantry?
Yeah, just go ahead.
435,
Yeah, just Google. Well, you can
we
just Google Chantry
Just
Guild.
Google?
Yeah.
I like that.
979-1775. Text me, 435-979-1775.
435-979-1775. Or I love that. Google Chantry Abbott, Guild Mortgage. Of course, the Larkin Group. You can Google the Larkin Group. You're going to find us. You're going to see the cool building that we're sitting in right now. It is widely and broadly displayed on our Google profile, and we can talk to you about. Okay, so what makes sense? I mean, do you buy now? Do you sell now? Do you keep your old home as a rental and move to another one? Do you sell that home? Right? How does that timing work out? Do you wait until the U.S. president, the presidential debacle is over? That's a whole separate conversation. But after we get out of September, we're going to launch hard and go back into a lot of that content, which we've talked about. But there's going to be a lot of October content about presidential elections and what happens with housing, et cetera.
Yeah.
So guys, hang on. 8:35 we'll be on. Facebook Live is going to stay running.
Thanks for having me.
Good morning, folks. Jeremy Larkin here, host of the St. George Real Estate Morning Drive, also known as the Cedar City Morning Drive, also known as the Real Estate Morning Drive. The reason I say this is because there's been an evolution and an evolution also, if you were Canadian. I think that's what they would say. But there's been an evolution of the show over the last 12 years. And if you're just picking us up, imagine that we've literally been doing this for 12 straight years. And sometimes I stay really motivated and sometimes I'm not very motivated. But the good news, is it's become second nature to show up and speak with you. So thank you for being on. We're broadcasting live from Larkin Group headquarters in downtown St. George. If you wondered where that is, it's the big, cool mural on the side of the old Cameo Florist building. And people know this building, right? I know I've got some fun guests here today. We're gonna shift gears, right? If you didn't pick us up before, earlier this morning we had about a 25-minute segment. This is all on Facebook Live, so if you're just picking up on Facebook Live, we had Chantry Abbott from Guild Mortgage, Jesse Paul with the Larkin Group on, and Chantry walked us through what actually happened with the Fed rate cut yesterday, because a lot of people were thinking it was just going to be a mortgage. There was going to be a mortgage rate cut. This was a federal funds rate cut. I advise you to go back and listen to that on Facebook Live after. I think it's really fascinating. And the bottom line is, I think it is the catalyst for further mortgage rate cuts, but there were no mortgage rate cuts. We saw the cost of borrowing money for things like home equity line of credit so you can fix up your garden. We're going to talk about the St. George Parade Gardens, or your landscape, or put a pool in, or buy an RV. Home equity lines of credit, auto loans, all those things came down about a half point. It's going to make it easier, I think, I hope it's going to make it easier for businesses to grow and those kinds of things. So let's shift gears, guys. I've got Karen Goodfellow and Doug Bennett with us. Karen has so many titles. She has so many titles. I felt like, listen, we put them all into a spreadsheet. I'm teasing, but you are involved in a lot of things, aren't you?
Yeah.
I mean, a good number. These folks are here, and we're going to talk about two things: your day jobs versus the St. George Parade of Gardens. They heard me say St. George Parade and thought St. George Parade of Homes. No, that's in February. That's forthcoming. That's definitely going to happen. So I want to start. Welcome, guys. Thanks for coming today.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, so happy to have you. All right, Karen, what all are you involved in? We're going to go to ladies first.
Thank you. So Parade of Gardens Southern Utah is the name of the event that we are organizing.
Yeah, so Southern Utah. So Parade of Gardens Southern Utah. Okay,
Parade
I
of
love
Gardens Southern Utah. And before that, I actually taught part-time at Utah Tech, environmental science and oceanography here in the desert. Yes, oceanography.
Listen, Karen, I have the oceanography merit badge. I just want you to know that. I did receive that as a Boy Scout. I went to Catalina Island and received it. I don't even remember anything we talked about, but it was really cool to be there.
Did you go there with
Scout camp?
Scout camp?
What bay is it? It's Emerald Bay Scout Camp. Okay, so this is cool. So you were doing that, and
I was going to Catalina Island, yes, for the environmental science trips, and then I shifted gears about 2.5 years ago and started spending more time with Conserve Southwest Utah, and on the water team, learning and engaging more about water conservation. And as part of that, I just kept thinking, we should do a garden tour here. We should highlight things about the best way to have landscape in the desert, right? I grew up by the ocean, so I'm completely landlocked right now.
Yeah.
So I needed to find my new coral reef to focus on, and that became desert landscapes.
I love this so much. This is really cool. You're like, I was by the ocean where everything just grew. Okay, I want to pin this for a second because I want to come back here. Doug Bennett's with us. Doug, tell us about your kind of day job and what your world is.
Well, I'm the conservation manager for the Washington County Water Conservancy District, which is a bit of a mouthful, right? So the water district in this region, we provide the regional water supply to all of the cities in the region. We have 8 member cities, so obviously all those in the urban St. George urban area. But we also serve Virgin Utah, and we'll be seeing much more going on in terms of conservation in this region because we're all working together to advance it.
It's funny, Doug. I love what you're saying, and someone was saying in my ear that maybe that someone's phone was playing, but it's not mine. It must be something upstairs. Doug, the Washington County Water Conservancy District. I mean, it is a mouthful. So let me tell you what these guys don't do. They're not driving around looking at our yards, probably like going, "Hey, we have a cheater." Right? I mean, you know what I mean, right? I mean, per se, this is not an HOA that we're running here. So, because I want to talk about 2 things. I think it's fun to talk about the Parade of Gardens and about conserving water, right? I was on another podcast with these. I mean, the folks that are here helping us produce this are friends with Blue Form Media, and we were in their studio in their home on Monday talking about golf courses. And we had this fun, lively debate. It was really fun. We had McCrae Hepler and Robert McFarland, and basically we set it up as a war of the minds. McCrae voted that the city should keep all of their city-owned golf courses, and McCrae voted that, and Robert said, "I think the cities shouldn't be in golf courses at all." It wasn't really to be conclusive. It was to debate ideas, right?
Stimulate conversation.
Yeah, it was to stimulate conversation. It was a fun dialogue. When we get this, I'm going to send it to you guys. So people are asking, you know what people are asking, right, Doug? You know what they're asking, Karen? Do we have enough water? Are we going to make it, right? Are we just going to, what are we going to do? Are we going to turn into like a salt flat here? I mean, I always give a really bad answer, which is, well, Vegas and Phoenix figured it out. We will too. But that's not a technical answer. Right? It's not. When you guys talk about, and I'll let either of you take this on, and then I want to talk about where this plays into the Parade of Gardens. But when we talk about conservancy, what are some of the initiatives that are happening right now for conservation? Like, what does that look like specifically?
Right. So when you ask about, do we have enough water? One thing that people absolutely have to understand is we are wholly dependent on the Virgin River Basin. It's a very small basin, right? So if we have drought in this region, our entire water supply, not just our homes, our landscapes are struggling, but the entire Virgin River Basin will typically struggle at the same time. So not only do our demands go up because it's hotter and drier, but our water supply goes down significantly because the river produces less water. And so it's really important to understand that. We don't have a lot of diversity in our supply. The things we're looking at doing here, I think everybody knows, as you do, Jeremy, this region is growing at a very fast rate. This is a fabulous place to live. And everybody realizes that as soon as they look at it or visit it. And so we have a lot of folks that want to live in this region, but we're trying to develop as responsibly as we can in terms of water use. And people who've already lived here, whether you got here 5 days ago or 5 generations ago, you want the next guy to use a little less water than everybody else did, right?
Of course
to
we
do
do.
it the best way they can. And so all of our cities, all 8 of the agencies we serve, have implemented new development codes to ensure that the homes and businesses we build are super efficient. They have the highest efficiency fixtures, the highest efficiency appliances. They have the highest efficiency landscapes and irrigation systems. They're required to have a smart irrigation controller connected to their phone, pulling in weather data, keeping track of things. So we are building highly efficient new infrastructure. But it's also important that we go back and look and see how we can retrofit some of the choices we made in the past. Because when your water supply is not close to its limits, you have a tendency. It's kind of like if you have a lot of extra cash.
You beat me to it.
You don't spend a lot of time on your decisions. You're like, oh yeah, I like that.
I'll have the
take
subscription.
that.
Just throw it on. It's just $20 a month.
And so it's important people know that lawn grass, takes 4 times as much water as the other adapted landscapes we could be putting into our yards. So even without choosing desert plants like agaves and cactus and so
Yuccas,
forth,
all the things.
anything other than grass, believe it or not, you could typically have a rose garden, and on a per square foot basis, you would use less water than you use keeping a lawn up. And so what's important is that we put the grass in the right places. And we see it in ridiculous places. I mean, you've been places where we got a coffee table sitting here in front of us. It's probably like 3 by 4 feet.
Sure.
I've seen grass planted in spots like that. And then sprinkler heads.
Yeah, kind of like
more asphalt.
we just needed some green. I can hear it. Can't you hear it now?
and that's one reason it was done. Was it was the cheapest way to instantly landscape a property and create instant curb appeal. So in the development process, if you wanted landscape, rolling sod and putting in sprinkler heads was the cheapest development method, right?
Oh, it goes down. I mean, especially if you have a landscape crew. I've seen a landscape crew show up and they'll throw 1,000 feet of sod in 15 minutes.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's just like roll it out and they walk away.
But being a real estate agent, you know that curb appeal is very important.
You bet it is.
You've had clients in your car where you pull up to a house and they're like, yeah, keep driving, accelerate, right? They just, you got to get them in the house to make the sale.
Well, it's so important. It's interesting. So I just sold a home on 200 West. That was it was my personal residence for a long time. 200 West and 144 South. And so we've talked about it a lot on the show, but it was so important that I spent a significant amount of time and money over 60 days before we put it on the market. It was a 1966 home. And when we sold the home, we had 8 offers, went $30,000 over the asking price. Well, the home was pretty cool. It was pretty cute. It was staged. Staging does a lot. Go in an empty parade home with no furniture, it's not quite as exciting as you thought it was. But the curb appeal was so good that people would kind of fall all over themselves, right? It does matter. But I love this, and I want to repeat what Doug just said. Water uses grass, standard landscape grass uses 4 times the water as desert planting, right? Honestly, probably almost any other planting, right? So let me shift gears, Karen. So I want to let's talk Parade of Gardens. How does this all factor in, right? Because we have the Parade of Gardens and we're going to see a variety of things. How many gardens are in this parade?
So we have 10 homes that are in the Parade of Gardens, Southern Utah, PGSU, we call it.
Yeah. Parade of Gardens, Southern Utah, which is funny because the St. George Parade Homes is definitely not St. George. It's like Hurricane, Santa Clara, Ivins. But I think it's known. So Parade of Gardens, Southern Utah, by the way, the website is, I have it pulled up on my phone, but what is the website?
paradeofgardensouthernutah.com.
Yeah, paradeofgardensouthernutah.com.
Yeah.
There you go.
You go. So we, there are 10 homes in here. So you have 10 people who have decided to share their landscape and allow you to walk through their gardens with them, which I think is just tremendously generous of them. And if you've met a gardener, they will pull you into their yard and they want to show you all the things they've done. You know, they really want to share what they've done. And gardening is like a constant experiment. Everyone that you talk to says, oh, well, I tried that here, but it didn't work well. It died. So I tried it over here and it did better. It is an ongoing learning experience, and it's an ongoing experiment. And they'll all tell you that. But I want to go back a little bit to say how this got started is Conserve Southwest Utah, the water team, met with Doug. I think you were 2 months into the job. Last August of 2023.
Yeah, would have been a few months.
He was a few months. So this is somebody who came from the Southern Nevada Water Authority, helped Vegas to do what they did for over 20 years, 23 or 4 years. 23 years. And we have this water whisperer, conservation whisperer here in St. George. Whispering water wizard, right?
There you go. There
we
it
got a new nickname for you, Doug. And we met with him, and Ed Andrushek, the president of Conserve Southwest Utah, kind of nudged me under the table and said, okay, Karen, now. And I looked at Doug and I said, so this water, lawn rebate program, we think it needs a little sizzle. And we'd like to do a xeriscape garden tour. And he said, yeah, I did that in Vegas. Good idea. You plan it and I'll help.
Yeah.
And here we are, like 13 months later, kicking off with 10 homes.
This is really, really cool. Let's talk about range of how far spread apart are these? Like, where are some of these homes, just for fun? Like
this
areas?
Is great. Go on our website, click on 2024 Gardens, and it will give you a generalized map of where the homes are.
Yep.
And it will give you their first names, and you can click on that, and you can read garden stories. So you can read the full garden story.
This is so cool.
And this year, it's really interesting because most of the people that we had, they submitted on our website. So we would happily accept people who are interested for next year, people who just started and think it'll be really even better for next year, or people who've been doing it forever. And the homes are in St. George, Santa Clara, and Ivins.
Yeah.
And we are very much on the western side of the county. And next year, we would love to have homes in Washington and Laverican and Hurricane and highlight people out there because there's a lot of homes out there.
Karen mentioned that this is about engagement, right?
Yeah.
And so people who've been to Parade of Homes know they're going to see the most spectacular dwellings, right?
Of course they are.
In the county. And they're going to, like you said.
Yeah, that is the entire premise of it. Because people, by the way, will complain, Doug. But no one can afford these homes. It's like, look, they weren't designed to be affordable.
Well, this is the opposite.
Right?
These are real people's yards. So imagine Parade of Homes, right? You're seeing spectacular stuff. You're just awestruck. You're going to have a lot more engagement. But imagine you went to Parade of Homes and it was a remodeling. People were in the process of remodeling.
This is fun.
And some of the rooms weren't finished yet. And some of the rooms were done. And then they were telling you about how they had to prop up the flooring and so forth and so on.
Yeah.
That's what you're going to get at Parade of Gardens. You're going to see people who say, when I got here 10 years ago, this was just a big lawn. I've gradually been converting it. So people are going to see themselves reflected.
I love this so much.
It's not going to be beyond their reach.
So
we're going to talk about, everything from, I guarantee you people are going to be sharing seeds from plants and following up with each other. And it's that engagement of the experience of gardening that I think is most captivating.
Well, and you're so right. You go to the Parade of Homes and you see people taking a lot of photos, especially when we went to, phones carrying a camera in them. But it's like, what are you going to you're not going to go reproduce a 13,000 square foot home. You're going to take some ideas. But I love this. And years ago, when John Pike was here, and Danielle Larkin and I, and John Pike, we got into this conversation about having a parade of remodeled homes. And we talked about we said, what if you did a parade of stuff all downtown, St. George, really focusing on, because by the way, I only have old things. You're in one of them right now.
It's beautiful.
I have an 1869 home on Main Street, the Samuel and Hannah Miles home. It's actually a nightly rental. It's really, really novel and people love it. The home I'm in is built in 1960 and the home I just sold was 1966. So I have an affinity, right?
Yeah.
Now I'm not very handy. And the difference for me is I didn't get in these homes and fix them with my own hands. I did a lot of piece by piece working with really great contractors to help me. What I love about the Parade of Gardens is these people they're like on their hands and knees in these gardens, right? Trimming and pruning and planting and moving and to me, it's really, really exciting what you guys are doing. And I also think it's reflective of a cultural movement in Washington County. And what I mean by this is we weren't that cool 20 years ago, but there's a lot of cool things happening here. You know what I mean by cool? I'm using cool. You kind of have to just understand what I mean by cool. A cool town has something like a parade of gardens. You know, it's just like, wow, it's the kind of thing that you'd see in, I'm not going to say a metropolitan area, but in a unique area. Call it a place like Park City or Sedona, Arizona, or the California coast. There's a feel for me. Yeah. Go ahead, Karen, you had a comment.
I was going to say, as you talk about doing cool things here, and Doug was talking about, I think we grew up and the traditional home is surrounded by grass and kids playing on it and maybe a few big trees and some rose bushes. And then you come to this environment and we have a lot of transplants and you cannot bring the same landscape ideas to this area. But we also want to create a culture of water conservation. The Virgin River watershed is our lifeline. And it's not just that little trickle of water that exists all year long, because the Virgin River is literally fed by groundwater.
I was going to say,
even in the middle of
I was going to say, like, hey, so everybody understands it's way more than what you see in the river, right? It's all the groundwater and aquifers and stuff like that.
It's groundwater. You can dig a hole next to the river, and I live in Bloomington, by the river in an older home. And if the water is coming out of the land and feeding the river, and it's this beautiful process, but the watershed is very fragile. And the more development we have along it, we have to really protect everything. The watershed includes every drop of water that goes from every area around that trickles into the Virgin River. So it's the water in the river, it's the water in the ground, it's the water that we're storing, but the culture of water conservation means that we embrace the beauty around us. And people moved here because they love this landscape. Yeah. They love the red rocks. They love how it looks. And we just want people to reflect that in how we're living here. You can't bring what you had in Colorado or up north in Salt Lake.
Like Kentucky bluegrass. When I was a child, this is kind of a funny story, but my father, when I was really young, we had Kentucky bluegrass. And he was meticulous. He'd get on his hands and knees and cut the spurge out. And eventually it's just kind of became known for all of us. This would have been 30 years ago. We all started to learn that wasn't going to work. That's something that you see growing in Cedar City or Salt Lake or higher elevations. But my point is, we've all we've had a little come to Jesus here in Southern Utah to say, okay, we have to do this differently. I actually really love a great desertscape. We have 3 minutes. I love a great desertscape. It is so cool.
And you talked about your building and the home that you live in. And I come in this building, I see a lot of, I see history, but I also see modern ideas brought into the space, right?
It was fully the intention.
And now what we're trying to do is on those older, whether you have one of those cookie cutter,
little stucco box
subdivision houses that are going up hand over fist, right? Whether you have one of those and you want to make it more distinctive, the landscape is one of those places you can exercise at and create these outdoor living spaces that have unique functions instead of just putting down a big rectangle of grass, right? And we're going to conserve water doing that and enhance the appearance of your home and the livability of it. And in the older areas where historically maybe there has been a lawn there, part of those upgrades, part of those improvements you make to these older structures can also be in the landscape. So there's an exciting one of my friends, Twyla Abrams, she has an Airbnb over on 200 East, I think.
Yeah, probably historic.
1910 house.
Yeah.
And she's redoing the entire landscape, and I think it's going to be fabulous. And I think these are the exciting projects.
Is that the one at First South? At First South and 200 East on the corner?
Yeah, help me out with what
it's got to be
the name of the family.
There. It was the Andelins owned it previously.
That's correct.
Okay, I've been watching that. Yeah. The Andelins are a really close friend. Close friends. Like one of their sons was my best man at my wedding. Yeah.
So, I did want to do the
and we got about just over a minute, so we know.
A plug for what Doug always talks about is trees. If you're going to do one thing in your yard, you can take one corner, redo it, and put a tree. If everybody in the city planted a tree in their yard now and one in 6 months and do it seasonally, it would create so much shade for us. Yeah. We don't need the grass.
I love this. We about 1 minute now? Here we go, 1 minute.
We love shade.
Guys, if somebody, this is so fun. This is so fun. Karen Goodfellow and Doug Bennett are here with the Parade of Gardens Southern Utah. And how do people go there? They're going to go to paradeofgardenssouthernutah.com. Guys, it literally starts, we're recording this. Is today the 19th or 20th?
The 19th.
19th. It starts tomorrow. This is the 20th, 21st, and 22nd of September. Like, this is in real time because sometimes people will catch this later. By the way, if you missed it and you do catch our show later, because this gets all repurposed into a podcast material, participate for next year, right? And I hope that we can see some after the fact, some gallery photos and some things maybe, because once the event's over, it's another year.
Well, and I'd also want to say that the Conservancy District sponsors all kinds of workshops, and we're going to highlight that you can go learn how to do all these conversions.
Thank you guys for coming on. Jeremy Larkin with the Larkin Group. Visit us at gostgeorge.com or Google the Larkin Group with your real estate questions. Over and out.